Okay, guys, today we're going to be looking at the Holocaust and diplomacy, and this is all in Indicator 7.4. Let's look at some of the learning objective questions that you should be able to answer after going through this lesson. The first question, and again, you'll answer these at the end, and they'll be put up for you at the end too. What were the causes of the Holocaust? Explain the stages of anti Semitism and its development in Nazi Germany leading to the Holocaust. Explain the purpose of the Nuremberg trials. And explain the formation of Israel and its purpose, as well as the problems that arose by its creation. So make sure that you have answered these questions at the end of your notes. Some key vocab words that you need to know as well. Of course, the word anti Semitism, um, which means, of course, against the Jewish religion. They were not in favor of the Jewish religion. Everything was against the Jewish religion. So that's what anti Semitism is. The word ghettos, which is going to come up, the ghettos were actually formed after um, the Nazis began to sort of take their revenge out on the Jews, and ghettos were where they pretty much put the Jews at. The word Kristallnacht, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, the final solution you need to know. Auschwitz and Treblinka were two legendary death camps during this period of the Holocaust. The Nuremberg Laws, which we're going to discuss, the Evian Conference, which we're getting ready to discuss. Um, there is a difference between death camps and work camps, so you definitely want to know this. Usually, the death camps, of course, if you were sent there, you were going to be put to death. They mainly sent people that were weak, and they thought that they didn't serve much of a purpose. So those were the people that were mainly sent to the death camps. Work camps, of course, meant for work. Eugenics, which we're getting ready to discuss, and Palestine and Israel. And the key things why you need to know those two countries is that Palestine is a Islamic country in the Middle East, and it would actually lose some of its land with when Israel is created. Both countries are in the Middle East, and both of them are going to play a role after the war is over with, and we're going to briefly discuss that as well. So let's move on. Let's look at some of the causes of the Holocaust and why all of this went on. And when we look at this, there's an acronym that I put up here. It says SNED, SNEDE. And of course, we're going to run through each one of these letters and go through what these causes were. And there are five of them, beginning with the letter S. And the letter S stands for segregation. The United States is going to play a role in one of the causes of the Holocaust. The United States was not a good example during the 1930s because the United States was also segregated. Remember, we had blacks and whites that were divided during this period. So the U.S. wasn't a good example, which, the Nazis could pretty much look at the United States and say, look, they're separated. Um, Maybe we should do the same. So segregation definitely plays a role in one of the causes of the Holocaust. The other one, the letter N, are the Nuremberg laws. And these laws were created in 1935. These laws were put in place to limit Jews severely. They were anti Semitic, again, meaning against the Jewish religion. They were racial laws against Jews in Germany. And these laws prohibited the marriage between Jews and Germans. If you were considered to have any Jew, what they would consider to be any Jewish ethnicity, then you were not allowed to even marry that person or even have, in some cases, any association with them. A lot of Jewish businesses were boycotted during the period of the Nuremberg laws, and it's going to hurt the Jews that are living in Germany economically. This is going to start a lot of the Jews from leaving Germany, and that brings us to the next thing, which is going to be the Evian Conference. The Evian Conference occurs in 1938. It was a conference between European countries where they were going to decide, how they were going to deal with this flow of Jewish people trying to flee Nazi persecution in Germany. And some of these countries set up quotas. And if you look at this map that I have down at the bottom of this slide, you can go through and you can read a little bit about what countries were taking Jews, what countries were not. Of course, the United States was, but a lot of the countries you see in green and yellow had quotas, meaning they would only accept a certain number of Jews. And so the Evian Conference was set up to try to solve this problem as to where some of these Jews that were fleeing persecution, where they were going to go. And only one of the 33 countries agreed to increase their Jewish quotas during that period. The letter D stands for depression. Remember, the depression occurs in the 1930s when Adolf Hitler is rising to power. He's promising Germany all these great things. And as Germany begins to sort of rebound and recover economically, a lot of the jobs that were being given out were given to people who were not Jewish. And the German people said, hey, we deserve these jobs more so than these Jews. And so we saw the Depression play a major role in the cause of the Holocaust. And then the last letter is for eugenics. And what eugenics was, and that's spelled EUGENICS, is the belief or the scientific idea of eliminating people who don't belong. And of course, Adolf Hitler believed in the elimination of the Jewish race and Jewish people, and eugenics was put into place by the German government during this period, especially as we get into the Holocaust and we get into this deep anti-Semitic belief during the 1930s and 1940s. Let's look at the next thing, which would be the stages of the Holocaust and how this sort of evolves over a period of time. And it begins, of course, with anti-Semitism. Again, the being anti-Jewish, not liking the Jews at all. And of course, the Germans are going to, of course, we read about Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. Adolf Hitler is going to blame the Jews for the ending of the war, World War One. He's going to put a lot of blame on that whole situation on the Jewish people. So anti-Semitism is where it starts, and laws began to be put into place by 1933 that showed that Nazi Germany was going to be anti-Semitic. The next word on there is Kristallnacht, and Kristallnacht was known as the Night of the Broken Glass. This is when the German Nazis actually went out and destroyed Jewish businesses. They destroyed Jewish synagogues, pretty much smashing all the windows, therefore, Night of Broken Glass. And it showed the violence that was going to take place and the hatred towards the Jewish people. So Kristallnacht, again, Night of Broken Glass, destruction of Jewish property, synagogues, and businesses. The third one on there are the emergence of ghettos, which I mentioned earlier. Ghettos were formed for the Jewish people. They were pretty much the rundown areas of town, and they tried to get most of the Jews living in one area, totally separated from the rest of the German population. Number four is when they began to transport a lot of the Jews. Once the war gets rolling, they begin to capture Jews and get Jews in other countries and other places that the Germans were invading, and they were forcing these people to go into labor and death camps. The labor camps, of course, were for work. Death camps naturally were for death. So they separated these people by if they were really able to do some work or they had some value, they didn't have a lot of value to them, then they sent them to the death camps. And we're going to look at a map in just a minute showing where some of those death camps were. And then the final thing was the final solution, which was Hitler's answer or Hitler's plan to exterminate all the Jews. He used a group known as the Einsatzgruppen, and the Einsatzgruppen were mobile killing units. They went around and they killed a lot of Jews. They traveled in vans. They rounded up the Jews, usually shooting them. Before they had these death camps, they had vans that they would actually gas the Jews or use carbon monoxide poisoning to actually kill them. They would crowd them into a van and then, of course, turn on the exhaust, and the exhaust would be funneled into the van, and it would kill and execute the Jews. So the Einsatzgruppen, you need to be familiar with them. These were mobile killing units sent out by Hitler to help extinguish the Jews. Here is a picture of where these death camps were located at and where the labor camps were located at. And again, I got a question here for you. Why were the death camps away from the populated areas in Germany? Write down your answer. I want to see what you come up with. Why do you think, if you notice the red Nazi symbols are showing you where the death camps were, the green are the regular concentration camps or labor camps. Why were the red ones where they're located at versus where the green ones and where they're located at? So answer that question, write it down, write the question down, and give me an answer for that, okay? Give you a minute to look at the map, and let's move on. As the war comes to an end and Germany is defeated, there became a big push to make sure that these Nazis face justice. And this is when we get the emergence of the Nuremberg trials. Nuremberg was a city in Germany where a lot of major rallies were done. And of course, we just mentioned the Nuremberg laws a few minutes ago. It's where these laws were put into place for the first time. So Nuremberg holds a significant and a symbolic reason for them having these trials in Germany. And so they're going to put these Nazis on trial. At this trial, the Nazis would have their own attorneys. Many of these Nazis that were put on trial just pleaded that they were following orders. This was not accepted by the tribunal, which was the military tribunal, which was formed from the Allied nations. They did not accept this plea that they were just following orders. 12 key Nazis were convicted and sentenced to death, but a lot of the key Nazi figures escaped, which is sort of sad because there were more than 12 that actually committed these crimes. Most of these crimes were what they considered to be crimes against humanity. Some of these Nazis would escape to South America and live out their lives. Some would actually be caught in South America. One of them was the guy that you saw in Operation Finale. The other was a guy named Joseph Mengele, who actually went to South America and lived out the rest of his life, and he was known as Dr. Death. So he escaped and still managed to live a normal life until he died. Adolf Eichmann was the guy in Operation Finale. Israel actually sent a task force in to capture him and bring him back to Israel to face trial for all the crimes that he committed during the war. The final thing here is the creation of Israel. Many felt really bad for what had happened to the Jewish people during World War II. And one of those organizations that felt really bad about it, as well as the United States and some of the other Western countries, was the United Nations. Remember, the United Nations had been formed, and the U.S. was part of it, as well as a lot of the Allied powers. But anyway, these countries were going to decide that Israel needed a home, or the Jews needed a home of their own, and Israel would become that home. But they would have to carve this new Israel out of another country, and that country was going to be Palestine. If you look at this map, you can see how Israel was sort of carved out. Um, British mandate shows you what they thought in 1946, and then the UN plan, which occurs in 1947, and then we get 1949 through 1967, where there's going to be a lot of fighting that's going to go on for territory, and the Israelis are going to win a lot of territory, which you can tell by the map. And of course, that last map in 2010 shows you that there are very small pockets of Palestinian control in Israel. So it has gone and it's gone through a change, and it has evolved into what we know today. But Israel was created after World War II as a homeland for the Jews, and it was carved out of land from the country of Palestine. And so that will complete 7-4, that indicator. Let's go look at those learning objective questions. You definitely want to write down these answers for these questions. If you want to write the questions down, you can. Now, what were the causes of the Holocaust? Explain the stages of anti-Semitism and its development in Nazi Germany leading to the Holocaust. Explain the purpose of the Nuremberg trials, and explain the formation of Israel and its purpose, as well as the problems that arose by its creation. Again, look at your key vocabulary. Make sure that you're familiar with all of these terms. Anti-Semitism, ghettos, Kristallnacht, the final solution, Auschwitz, Treblinka, Nuremberg laws, Evian conference, death camps, work camps, eugenics, Palestine, and Israel. Okay, that's going to complete our lesson on indicator 7.4. We're going to start on the Cold War. That will be the next thing that we'll be doing. So, again, get your notes together, start reading over these things, looking over this, getting yourself familiar with this material, and I will catch you on the next one.